Greetings, fellow space travelers. BionicDance here. I'm going to show today how it is that I animate spaceships having a sort of vaguely Star Warsian style dogfight. I like spaceships that move like airplanes in space because it's fun. So for those of you who insist on like real Newtonian physics in your spaceship dogfights, you're going to hate this video and you should leave now. But for the rest of you, I want to show you how it is that I can make this happen because I do a lot of it in Quinn Redshift, my upcoming animated project. So, animating these things is not done the way you might expect, you know, with keyframes being set with movement and all of that. No. In this particular case, what we're doing is actually having these spaceships fly in a line. You see, here I am, I've created this geometric shape here. It's just a line. If I try to render it, the computer, it won't show up in a picture I try to render. Let's just put it that way. But this is what I'll be using to control the spaceships. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that when one spaceship is shooting another, it's actually a little difficult to control where the blasts go, where the beams or bolts or whatever it is they're firing. Controlling where that goes isn't as easy as you might want it to be. So what you end up having to do is to put the blasts where they're going to go and then put the ship they're going to hit where the blast is when it hits them. Okay, but first let's make these things fly. So, like I say, I've made a line. Now, I've selected the spaceship here. It's called a zoom ship, which I know is kind of silly and childish and simplistic, but also so is the universe I've created. It's very stylized, very sort of Jetsons-y, so zoom ship makes sense. Anyway, what we have to do is take its position controller, which would have been the keyframes that I was talking about before, and change it just to a path constraint, you see. And then I add a path. And as you can see, it follows that path. But what it doesn't do is actually face the direction the path is going. So we will tell it to follow. Now it's facing the wrong direction, easily fixed. And then we also want to tell it to bank, which it won't do just now because this line here is not actually curved. So it has no way to bank. Now, I should also probably figure out just how long I want this particular shot to be. Sorry, I'm just making this more visible. So that when I'm animating, it will be the right length. Now, I have it set to 100 frames at the moment. That's too many, really. I think 60 is probably the best. That's 2 seconds worth of video. So, there. Now, we can see how fast this thing flies, and it's not going to be very... because that line is really short. It goes from, one end of the line to the other in 2 seconds. It's moving pretty slowly. It's like a car trying to park. So we want to make this line a bit longer. How much longer really depends on what you're trying to do. Right now I'm just making a generic space flight, space battle, combat thingy, so it doesn't have to be very long. And also, a lot of the shots that I make, there's a lot of rapid cuts that happen. So, let's see. It's still a bit too slow. Playing around with time and distance in these things is, it gets interesting because sometimes you're like, that didn't take long enough. But then you're like, but it also moved just as much as I wanted it to move. So you have to decide whether or not you're just using too many frames in the shot. That's nice and quick. Okay. So now if you want it to swerve around like it's really flying, what we have to do is change these points from corners to, now, okay, to be fair, for anyone out there who speaks French, you're going to hate me for this. I was raised in Vermont, and, well, nobody really pronounces anything French in a French way there, so you're going to hate that I say Bezier as Bezier, but I'm going to frickin' do it because I'm used to that. It's what I grew up on, so if you hate that, cope. But what this does is now it creates these handles that let me, yeah, okay, that's good, that let me drag the line around a bit and cause a curve, you see, like that. Now, it's also fairly flat, so the question is, do we want this thing to go up or down when it's fighting? Oh, whoops, I've got both points selected. I only want one. So there you can see how that line has changed a bit. Now I can make the initial curve a bit more extreme. Oop, nope, that's up and down. I want side to side. Alright, make that a bit more extreme. There. Now let's see what the zoom ship does. Well, I mean, that's nice movement, but what it's not doing is banking much. It's not very exciting. So let's go up here, back to where we set the path constraint, and just change the bank amount. And you can see when it's on one of these curves, and you change the bank amount, it turns a little bit, you know? It gives it some of that rotation that planes do when they're flying around. And so now you've got that. I mean, I guess that makes sense because when it's going to be shooting, it'll probably do it from the beginning here. And then it'll spin away from the explosion and try to get away from it. Mind you, I'm not sure I'm giving it enough space to get away from the explosion, but it doesn't have to be perfect. Let me just real quick... Oops, what am I doing? Oh yeah, I have the ship selected and not the line selected. You want to be careful with that sort of thing. So we move it here a bit, a little bit back. Let's see what that does. Yeah, I like that better. Okay. And also we can move this a little just to make that getting away from the explosion bit in the beginning a little more... Actually, if you notice, the curve of the line here is already going upward a little too early for my taste. So I will move this out a bit, and you can see how that part flattens a smidge. If I really want it even flatter, I can do that. It's possible. But it does require a little cheating. In fact, you might notice as we go on with this video that cheating is actually a lot of what you end up doing with these things to make it look good, but we'll get there in a bit. Alright, there we go. I think that looks pretty good. Let's just have a look. It'll do. Alright. Now, here's the part that gets a little bit tricky, because how do I get this thing to not merely shoot, but shoot where I want it to shoot? What we do with that, actually, is I have some hidden objects in here. There is a blast. That is what it will look like when the ship shoots. That's what it'll be shooting. And I'll explain those colors in a second. And then we also have... Oop, there's the light you can see. There we are. These lines right here are actually not a path that the blast will follow the way the ship here is following a path, but rather just a guideline of where to put the darn things. Now, like I said, I'll explain the colors. You can see how it's like red and yellow and orange and all of that. That has to do with what color the blast is going to be when it's rendered. The idea I had for the way that the blast for the good guys and the bad guys would look is that, sure, they follow a certain color scheme, but like a color palette, but at the same time, they look different from, like, depending on which side you see them from. So if you watch this render, you can see it starts out looking kind of white. That's because it's got a big old glow on it. And you see how it's a little bit more yellow here, a little bit more red there. And if you look, that's because of that. The glows sort of blend together a bit. I don't know. Maybe it'll come off right. Maybe it won't. But I kind of like it. So, what we have to do now is, for the first time, we're actually turning on the auto key button, which helps us animate something that is not on a path like that. The path doesn't actually require setting keyframes, like I said. So the first frame where I want this ship to shoot should probably be about, let's say, a half second in. That works. And so then we will take this, the blast, and just center it right there on those little guidelines. And we will also make sure that when it goes to the center, it also faces the right direction. It sets its orientation to be the same relative to these lines here, right? So, oh, look at that. They're a little bit low, so that's fine. We can easily fix that. There, and we should also move them sort of backward inside here a little bit. I may have not set those lines correctly. That's fine. Like I say, they're only guidelines. They're not meant to be taken as gospel. Now, here's the problem. I've put the blast where I want it to be when it first gets fired, but there's a keyframe over here. Now, even if I remove that keyframe, which makes it look like that, it'll still be visible. Right there, when the ship comes up to it to shoot, you can still see them. So what I do with that is actually a little bit complicated and a little bit annoying, but just set the visibility down. Some people might adjust the opacity, but this is actually a little bit easier for these purposes. Now, because the auto key was on, it set a key, which means that right now it has 0 visibility. If I were to render right now, you wouldn't see it. And the keyframe it's set, because I didn't set it to 0 visibility at the very first frame, this frame will be 1 visibility, which means it'll be completely visible. I'll just move that up to the keyframe where it's actually going to be firing for the first time. So you can see it just sort of pops into existence there. Let me zoom in so it's easier to tell. Like that. You see, it just appears out of nowhere. That actually gets us around a bunch of other problems that could come up later. But regardless, that is good for our purposes. Now, the thing is, when I want this thing to move and to actually shoot, what do? Well, here is where you get into the cheating, because I've discovered 5 frames is as far or is as much time as I need. That's like, well, I mean, a standard frame or a second of video is 30 frames per second. So 5 frames is what, like 6? I'm terrible at math. But what we will then do is move this to the far end there of where the shooting is happening. Now, it may look a little cheaty, because if I let these things just go, right, if I let them just go forward for 5 frames, and if the ship shoots multiple shots, they'll appear to, like, do this funky fanning out pattern that just looks completely unnatural. And so you want to avoid that. Just trust me, it doesn't look good. It looks like bad filmmaking. If you watch, like, say, Star Wars or any of those, you'll notice that the shots seem to travel not merely in a straight line, but in a straight line relative to the direction the ship is traveling, you see. And so it doesn't actually just, I mean, it doesn't follow the exact realistic science, you see. Now, another problem with this is that a lot of these keyframes will try to smooth themselves out. They'll try to, like, make things a bit more organic, but what we want is for these things to travel in a straight line. So we set these that way, you see, to linear instead of these curves, these angles. And that way it'll always travel in the same direction without a lot of, like, extra moving around that would look right from a character, but not with a spaceship. Now, another problem, though, is once it gets there, Oh, whoops. Silly me. I imported this from another shot. Ordinarily, what would have happened is it would have just stopped moving right there, and that's it. But because I went into the graph editor, into the curve editor, I was able to tell it, okay, the things you've been doing, keep doing them at the same rate. And that really, well, I could get into it. There's a lot of technical stuff here, but what it comes down to is, you've got height, length, or height, side, the X, Y, and Z axes here. And you select all of those keys right there, and you see how there's these dotted lines? You use this out of range type, so you can tell it to keep moving in a constant rate. You can tell it to cycle back and forth, like, go right back to the beginning after you finish the last keyframe. You can make it loop, ping pong, all of this stuff. I told it to do relative repeat, which basically just says, okay, what you've been doing, keep doing that. And so you can see why it comes in from behind as well. You'd be able to see that if I hadn't changed the visibility. So, before it even hits, you can see it doesn't look like it's there, but then, bam, out it goes. You see? And it's probably easier to see if I hide the guidelines, and in fact, let's hide the path as well, and you can see what it's doing. Right? Bam! And you can see, even though I cheated a lot with the the path guidelines with where the blast goes, it still looks pretty natural. So now we know where that blast is going to go. We need to figure out exactly when it's going to hit the enemy ship and put it there. So we have our path and we have our blast. Where does it end up? I think it'll hit the enemy ship right about there, don't you? Because this will avoid the explosion of the enemy ship. And so it just seems natural to put it there. And so we want another line like that. We want to assign the controller here. If it'll let me. What's going on here? Oh, that's why. All right. And so path constraint, right? Add path, this, and then we want it to, oh, listen to the cat meowing. I don't know if the microphone picked that up. Set it to bank. What was the bank setting on this bad boy? Not that we'll necessarily use the same one. It's actually better if ships don't do exactly the same thing as other ships. In fact, that's one of the things about animation, is if you if you recycle too much, eventually it starts to look unnatural. There's a thing called twinning that you don't want to do when you're animating characters. You don't want the arms to move at exactly the same rate or whatever. There's a lot of technical stuff going on there. But all right, so we now have this ship here. Columbia wants attention. Okay, kitty, I'm making a video. Hush you. And then we want to make sure that the... Oops, nope, we do not want the Zoom ship... the pirate fighter ship selected yet. Alright, so we just want to make sure that that they're flying at roughly the same rate, even if not exactly the same rate. Just so their speed seems reasonably similar. Let's get you over here. That's where the blast will hit you. Now, to be fair, I'm not necessarily... because this ship is going to have to curve and bank as well. So where I've put these coordinates, these points for the path that it follows, may not be quite what I want yet. So let's see, we'll change that to Bezier corner. And then where does it start out is a good question. It starts there, So it sort of looks like it's being pursued by the zoom ship, but it's not low enough. So we want it down here. So they start out on roughly the same plane. Oh, when they're going after that, whoops, we want this handle out here, so it appears to be going relatively straight at first. And then let's go to frame, what was it, 50? That's where it would probably hit. So we want this over here. No, we don't. We want it kind of there. Well, not exactly. Let's see. I mean, we're getting there. And then we'll want to move this up a smidge. Maybe move this up a smidge. There. And then move this handle in a bit. Wait, I am not controlling everything. X and Y axes. Like I said, this can get a little tricky with the timing and the positioning of everything. Alright, there. Now, it is more or less intersecting with the place where the blast will hit it, you see. And, I mean, given how fast this action is, it doesn't have to really impact anything. It just has to be in the right basic spot. So, now that I've got that going on, let's just hide these paths and these lines as well, the guidelines, just so we can see what it looks like clean. There we go. All right. Now, obviously, the blast keeps going through the enemy ship there, through the pirate fighter. So, right here, we're going to want to do the same thing we did before, but in reverse. We're going to set the visibility to 1 on that frame, the frame where it hits, and then we're going to set it again to 0 on the frame after, so it disappears. And it looks like the setting it to 1 didn't take. It does that sometimes. So there. See? Gone. So now what we get is that. Now, obviously, the pirate fighter just keeps right on going. There are a couple of things you can do about that. You can just do the same thing as I did with the visibility controls, but because this is made up of many, 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 many pieces, as you can see, the different colors indicate that it's an object that has been parented to the base object, right, but isn't actually part of it. And so setting the visibility for all of that can get a bit iffy. I mean, if you have to move a keyframe around or whatever, it's just giant pain, right? There is another thing you can do, though. You can move the entire path the heck out of the way, right? So there's the frame where it hits. And we might need a few frames after that, just, you know, because the explosion, if the spaceship disappears, and like the explosion is still kind of tiny when it hits, it can look weird. It's like the explosion came out of nowhere and the spaceship just disappeared, right? So what we can do, and again, this is a total cheat, is just to set a key of the for the position of the path that the space pirate fighter follows. And then, if this will consent to let me actually do something, just move it the heck out of the way so that it also, not only will it not be seen, but like it won't affect shadows or anything. Just move it the heck out of the way. And, oh gosh, our controller for position on that thing is not what I wanted. We will set it there. And then what you do is you actually set it as just as sort of a jump like that. I forget actually what the term is for that. Also, I did it wrong at first. I forgot to set a key for the path on the frame where it... Hold on, there we go. Okay. That's where I want it to be. Oh no, I did set a key. I forgot that I wanted to set the key for when it disappears over here. Got it. Okay. So then, like I say, just move it the heck out of the way. And I undid the setting of the controller. There we go. And this will just make it jump from one place to the other without any interpolation between the two different points. So you can see, bip, there it goes. Right? So if I hide that, hide these, and expand that so we can see it, right? So that is the beginning of a space battle. Space explosions are difficult. Heck, any explosion is difficult. Making something look like realistic fire? Oof, don't get me started. But even toon-shaded fire, right? Or just a Star Wars style explosion, not the easiest thing in the world. You have to use a particle system, or at least that's the way I did it. Basically, there's a bunch of geometry that pops in like that, you see, and then goes away. That's not what it's gonna look like when it's rendered, when it's all said and done. But the way it's done, there's like sort of a vaguely teardrop shaped thing that I created that has a texture on it, that has a material on it. And so when you render it, hold on a sec here, it looks like an explosion. It's all just geometry. It's got various textures on it that change over time with the age of the particles, but you can see it just looks like, you know, an explosion. And then as it slowly fades like that, it doesn't just stay solid, even though that's what you see in the viewport here. It starts to get, you know, darker and angrier, more like it has some smoke to it, not just fire kind of thing. An expanding ball of plasma sort of nonsense. So you get that going on, and then when it's just about to be gone, it looks a little bit different. See, I went through a lot of animation to try to find what an explosion looks like at the end of a cartoon explosion, and oddly enough, almost everything cut away before you could actually see what was going on, like what an explosion looked like when it died out. So I had to make it up myself. I found one or two that actually, the camera holds on the explosion till the end, but it's pretty rare. Basically what I did was I had these things go translucent from the inside out, but not merely from the inside out. It has to do with which direction the camera is pointing. It sounds a lot more complicated than it is, trust me, but it would be very difficult to explain to people who have never actually done this kind of animation. And you can see it's taking a long time. That's because there's a lot of geometry on top of other geometry. All of those different teardrop shapes. There's like 160 of them in there, and so there's no real good way to tell the computer don't bother calculating certain things. There's no way to tell 3ds Max I am not trying to go for super uber realistic, and so turn off this feature, that feature, that feature. You can do it with some of them, but not everything. You see. So that is sort of where an explosion ends up by the end of it, but it goes by so fast that it just looks like, a bunch of, like a ball of expanding plasma, expended all its energy, and now it's done. So the next question, of course, is how do I make this look even more exciting? Because right now we're seeing it from a bit of a distance, aren't we? I think it would be a very good idea to stick a camera in there and make it a lot more exciting, don't you? So we'll just start with a free camera. Oh, I'll get to you in a minute, kitten. Right now, I am making something for the people to watch. And I know you're people too, but you don't really care about my space battles, so... Alright, you can see what the camera is seeing down in the lower right there. Let's rotate that a smidge. There. And you know what? Let's move it even further that well, nah, this way, I think. And then, like, see, the problem is that what I want it to do is for the pirate fighter to sort of come in from one side of the screen. I'm not sure I can really do that with the relative positions of these two ships. So what I will do now is set all of the keys I need for the camera. And let's actually get to the very end of the shot and just see where I want it to end up, and we'll make all of the middle bits later, kind of like what we did with the shooting, actually, where I put the thing that was getting shot in second rather than trying to aim the original ship at it. So let's get this going on here. That looks pretty good. Yeah, so what do we have now? Well, okay, so the actual exploding part where it got shot happens right about here. Yeah, that's right. So what we want to do is move this so that that is nicely visible. That could be good. Let's move it a little bit so we can see the zoom ship as well. That could be good. Bam. I mean, that looks pretty good. We're a bit close to the explosion. I don't know how much of that we want to see. And I think, yeah, the idea of having the zoom ship off camera at first isn't working as well for me as it might. So that's pretty good. Let's see about moving. Actually, I want to make sure that there's a rotation key here because that looks pretty good as is. Although I might want to, yeah, fill the frame more like that. Okay. And so, ba-bam. And then we've got the zoom ship just sort of flying off frame. That looks pretty exciting, actually. Let's see what we've got. That works out pretty well for me. I don't know about you guys. Now, obviously, these ships are empty, and I designed them specifically so that even from the outside, you can see the pilots. You can see the maneuvers they do while they're flying and stuff like that, and I thought that was a pretty cool idea. I'm not going to animate this part. That would take forever. I mean, you can picture it. I've shown you some character animation stuff before. So, okay, that's almost as exciting as we'd like it to be. But let's do a little something more with the camera real quick. Let's start at a slightly different angle, right? And so then it goes like this, like that. And then over there, let's see, we want it to be more of like that, I think. But let's get rid of the position key that it for some reason made without my permission. All right, and then we'll put that there. So let's see what that looks like. I think I might need to get rid of that as well, that rotation key. I hate to do it, but okay, now let's set that to local, move that there, move that there, and then, okay, that could work. So let's see what we got. Well, now I feel like I need to rotate this again in a different direction. Yeah, alright. See, that is one problem with animating like this, is there's a lot of times where you just end up second-guessing yourself and having to redo stuff because something else you tweaked kind of made it break a little. But that looks pretty good. Yeah. Alright. I think we have ourselves a shot. Let's see what it looks like when we render it out, eh? So that's what it takes to animate a space battle, folks. But think about this. Some of the shots in Quinn Redshift have like 31 spaceships in them. Oh wait, no, it's 32. Yeah, imagine animating that. Just saying. Anyway, until next time, this is BionicDance.